What's up, guys? It's Dr. Tim Jackson with another episode of the Boss Body Podcast. Today, I have a return guest with me, Dr. Dana Cohen, MD. She's the author of Quench and now her most recently released book, Fuel Up.
While I make every effort to broadcast correct information, I'm also still learning. I will double check all my facts, but realize that healthcare is a constantly changing science and art. One doctor or healthcare provider may have a different way of doing things from another. I welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. I take no money from supplement or device companies. By listening to this podcast or reading this blog, you agree not to use this podcast or blog as medical advice or to treat any medical condition in either yourself or others, including but not limited to patients that you are treating. Consult your healthcare provider for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast or the website. Under no circumstances shall any guests or contributors to the podcast or blog or any employees, associates, or affiliates of the Boss Body podcast be responsible for damages arising from use of the podcast or the blog. This blog or podcast should not be used in any legal capacity whatsoever, including but not limited to establishing the standard of care in a legal sense or as a basis for expert witness testimony. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or the blog.
Welcome to the show, Dr. Dana.
Thank you for having me back.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about the new book and the premise behind it.
So the new book, my co-author is Colin Sapphire. He invented the NutriBullet and then sold that company, has a new product called the Beast Blender. And it's like Instagram's favorite blender. It's gorgeous. It's super powered. It's an amazing blender. And part of that original blender had a hydration vessel attached to it and ways to sort of make infused blends with the blender. So he had contacted me many years ago saying, because of Quench, because of the hydration book, wanting to try to figure out how to work together. And then in our time together and speaking and all these years going by, I said, why don't we write the book? Because what I realized is that Colin is a regular person. He's not a medical doctor, but he has what I call Colinism. So he lives the blending lifestyle, and we just sort of got together and decided to write the next step for hydration. But then it turned into an even bigger thing, and it is our sort of dipping our toe into this ultra colossal problem of ultra processed foods and how to make small changes using your blender to limit them. We'll never get rid of them. It's going to be impossible unless you are, living on the land or something. But every little bit counts. Right now, about 65% of the U.S. diets are consist of ultra processed foods. And if any step in lowering that is going to be a huge step in the right direction of decreasing chronic illness, which is the biggest burden on our health system right now, because we are all getting older, we're living longer, yet we're not living better.
Right. I'm glad you brought up the point of ultra processed foods, because I just came across a PhD level dietitian the other day on social media, and she said, we can't really define what a processed food is. I'm like, wait, maybe you can't, but I'm not, like my 2-year-old niece. I've been schooling her pretty well. So talk about, how do we operationally define ultra processed food?
Okay, great question. So there is a classification system. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. It's called the NOVA classification system. I think it was developed in Brazil by a bunch of scientists. And there's four levels. So ultra processed foods are the worst. So those are the ones that are, there are things added, emulsifiers and agents that are going to make it more palatable, more taste better, addictive, things that have shelf life longer. So all these things. So that big companies, the ones we're talking about, the cereal makers and those things, can keep them on the shelves longer and have people buy them. So bottom line is it's a lot of ingredients. My job is to try to teach people to just look at labels. When you start to get that in the back of your head, I've done it like this. We teach best what we most need to learn. So when I go to the grocery store, I look at it, I'm like, oh, no, I don't want it. I can do better than this. I can either make this myself easily with a blender or not, or whatever, and just do better. And one of the impetuses for me writing the book was there is this delicious steak sauce that I love. I've loved it for years. And what I realized, and I never looked at the label. I don't think I wanted to look at the label. And what I realized is that the only reason I like it is it has horseradish in it. Any vehicle for horseradish, I'm in. I love it. I crave it. It's so good.
I love it.
And so I started and then when I looked at the label, I was mortified. 4 different types of different sugars, and including high fructose corn syrup and just a bunch of stuff that I didn't recognize. And I was like, I can do better than this. And I can even do better like buying, and I'm going to be honest here, like there's some natural ketchups that I don't particularly love the taste, like some really good ones you can get in the health food store that are just a few ingredients. I hate the taste of them. You add horseradish to them and it's delicious. It's just the horseradish. So then we developed a recipe, but that was sort of the impetus, like, oh, I can do better than this, and have the same results, if not even better results as far as taste and that kind of thing. So that was, that's the ultra processed foods. And then there's other classifications. So unprocessed are things, or unprocessed or minimally processed are things like that are single ingredients things. We know fruits and vegetables are unprocessed. Even frozen fruits and vegetables are minimally processed. And then it goes to the things in between. But it's the fourth one, the one that has been shown scientifically to increase risk of chronic disease, including certain cancers, including osteoporosis, diabetes, heart disease, Alzheimer's, all of those things. So there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know on the topic of ultra processed foods, Girl Scout cookies. So I know Joe Rogan mentioned, I think it was last month or maybe January, that they sent some to a lab, not him, but moms across America, and they came up positive for lead, arsenic, and then moms across America retaliated and said, well, it wasn't a double-blind, placebo-controlled study. And I'm thinking, it doesn't have to be. It was sent to a lab, it was tested. I mean, why do you need like spend $8 million on a study? It either has metals or it doesn't. Yeah.
Completely. Yeah, I totally agree. But I don't understand, like a double-blind placebo-controlled study of what?
Right. That's what I was wondering too.
It doesn't make sense. It's got, just look at a label.
Right.
I was at a friend's house recently, like extraordinarily well-off couple, like no, smart, educated, and let their 13-year-old son go to the grocery store and buy some things. And he bought a package of it was either muffins or some kind of cake thing, like in a plastic clamshell. And when you look, the list of ingredients literally came across the label that covered the opening, and it was 50 ingredients long. And I was like, no, we can't do this, So it affects all of us. And we need to the bottom line is just start looking at labels, taking tiny, little steps. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to eat just fruits, vegetables, meat and whatever. We're all going to have birthday cake, once in a while. But think about this, what better tool than a blender to limit ultra processed foods, right? So nobody's throwing cake in a blender,
Yeah. So talk about the difference between blending and juicing, because I know I have a juicer, I have a NutriBullet, but I know a lot of people say with juicing, and I know it's different than blending, but when you remove the fiber, it spikes glucose and insulin.
Yeah. I do think juicing, I mean, there's a place for juicing, and maybe, in, I think like cancer people, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's a high sugar load, especially if you're juicing fruits and those kind of things. So you're taking out all the fiber, the things that are going to help sort of slowly release it a little bit, and you're just extracting the juice. So that is, and blending is literally that. You're using any kind of blender. It doesn't have to be an expensive blender. It doesn't have to be a Beast or a NutriBullet or even a Vitamix. It could be a $5 blender that you get at a thrift store, but blending it and then drinking the whole thing with the fiber and everything in it. It's almost like masticating. It's almost chewing it yourself. So it's pre-digested. Now, and also I just want to be clear, we are not advocating every meal be blended, that kind of thing. But if you go back to Quench too, Quench was a smoothie book.
Right.
What better way to get vegetables and fruits into your diet than blending? Because none of us do it. None of us get enough fruits and veggies and fiber even. Like we do not get enough fiber in our diet. So blending and every something like 96 or 98% of all households have a blender, so it's just, and it's fun. It's easy, it's fun. You feel like you can experiment, you can get kids involved. So, that's the bottom line. It's a very simple book, but it's something that we all need to hear and remember and get some ideas. And it's not just smoothies, it's sauces, it's condiments like pestos, it's weird ways to use your blender, making crackers and breads, and chicken salad and other things. So there's over 100 recipes, really fun recipes in there.
So if you have a macro template of mostly protein with some fat and a little bit of carbs, is it good for all nutritional templates?
Is blending good for all nutrition? Yeah.
Yeah. So like you have recipes in the book, correct?
Yeah. I mean, I think, so for example, if you're on a metabolic diet, like if you're on a ketogenic diet or something like that, it's probably not the book for you, although I do think that, you could blend greens and just get more greens in that way, but it's not going to, it's some people just don't like plain greens because then it might be too much sugar with the fruits and that kind of thing. But the one thing that we're very clear in the book that this is no diet. We're very specific about not talking about diet. And I'm going to be honest with you, Tim, I really do think that I worked for Dr. Atkins almost 30 years ago. I've been subscribing and prescribing keto diets, low carb diets forever, and everything in between, and I think that I've done maybe some injustice to my patients. I think we've created people who don't know how to eat then when they get off a ketogenic diet, which is impossible for most people to follow lifelong. They go right back up, and what ends up happening is they end up yo-yoing. So how do you eat? How do you eat for life? How do you nourish to flourish? I love that saying.
Right.
It all goes back to basics. It all goes back to real food as Mother Nature intended, as much whole food as possible. And then you can make tweaks there if you're, gluten sensitive or dairy sensitive or whatever it may be.
Yeah, it goes back to JERF, Just Eat Real Food, which I stole from Sean Croxton. He was the host of the Underground Wellness podcast back in the day. It was like the first podcast I was ever on. But when you talk about ketogenic diets, I think they're great for, cancer, certain mental illnesses, based on the studies like Chris Palmer at Harvard. But then when you look at the gut and the saccharolytic fermentation versus proteolytic fermentation, how we produce butyrate, acetate, propionate, valerate, we need some fiber. We need, those carbohydrates to a degree.
Yeah. And, there was that recent study that came out a few years ago that we talk about in the book about people who eat more than 30 different plants a week have the most diverse gut microbiomes. And, that sounds daunting, but when you think about when I say plants, I'm not only talking fruits and vegetables, I'm talking nuts and seeds and spices, and everything else and we talk a lot about that in the book, and we even give like a little hashtag thing, and we have a smoothie that has something like 17 different plants in it, easily, or a meal that has
Right.
17. It's not that hard, but it's important to mix it up, a diverse diet, lots of plants, whatever they may be, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, spices. Am I missing a plant? Um, and and I think that that's really the way to go. Now, it doesn't mean that I won't prescribe, somebody who's overtly diabetic and blood sugar is in the 300s. I'm going to say, you know what? Let's get your blood sugar down. Let's get the ball rolling in the right direction and put them on a ketogenic diet. Get
Right.
those cravings out of their, give them, it takes 3 days to stop those sugar cravings, and then get them doing that, getting them to start building muscle, burning fat, that kind of thing. And then the issue is then transitioning them over into a real whole food diet.
Okay, talk about lectins. So, we mentioned plants, and a lot of people are under the impression plants are killing us. They're going to try and kill us, disrupt the gut microbiome. But my understanding, because I've been studying gut health for 20 years now, if you avoid the reason people benefit in a large part on a ketogenic diet is they're lacking the microbes to process the lectins and the other phytonutrients or anti-nutrients rather in the gut microbiome. So at some point, you have to build up the gut microbiome by eating plants to increase the diversity.
Yeah. Yeah. So also another thing that we really try to guide people in the book. So for example, a low FODMAPs diet. We'll put people on a low FODMAPs diet. They feel fantastic. They're really, everything is, the problem then is that they stay on it too long, and then getting them to transition over and starting to reintroduce foods we've created, these it's really difficult to do. So it takes work. It takes work on the patient's part in people like that to try to, yes. So you're right. Lectins, and then anything with like a low FODMAPs thing, once again, creating almost a bit of an eating disorder in patients over time.
Yeah.
They're only ever meant to be short term, and then working to slowly, maybe starting by cooked vegetables, obviously soaking your legumes, your lentils, your beans, those kind of things over time, but your chia seeds even, soaking them and trying to do that. And then there's some people who may never be able to not eat them for whatever reason, but there's still other ways around that. And that's where it really becomes sort of personalized medicine and working one-on-one with a nutritionist or somebody who's very sort of familiar. But it does take work. That's really the bottom line.
And do you do a lot of GI testing, like the GI map? Well, I don't know if that's allowed in New York State.
No.
Okay.
We do,
Yeah.
yes, we use Vibrant Labs, a gut zoomer, and patients have to test outside of New York, but yeah, I do a ton of gut testing. I love testing. I really do love to sort of look at data. And sometimes I'm going to give you a little nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Sometimes it's even just for the patients to have some data. I think sometimes something clicks in their head. Even food sensitivity testing. I'm not sure that it's super valuable. It's really valuable when you do a food sensitivity test on them and one thing is off the charts. One or two things. You take that out of somebody's diets, their life is gonna change. But when everything is a little off the charts, then you got to look at their guts and sort of go from there. But it's just sort of ammunition for patients to sort of say like, okay, you know what, I got to do something here. And there's a nuance to doing it too. I think a lot of practitioners don't, I think they go overboard in reading those results,
Yeah.
and how do I say this? Over read them, you know.
Yeah,
So
I've found the same thing. I mean, because if your results come back and you're lit up like a Christmas tree, you're going to go into a sympathetic dominant state. Your cortisol is going to go through the roof, and then any benefit you might have reaped, you're negating by the stress. Plus, it's really an indication that you have a microbiome imbalance, so pancreatic exocrine insufficiency, low stomach acid.
yeah, yeah, and I think you also it's hard. Functional medicine is really hard. You have to sort of take a stand, and people want everything done at once, and you can't. It is a process. By the way, though, changing your lifestyle and diet is the fastest way to getting healthy, but it's still a process. There's still sort of a step-by-step thing that you have to do to sort of get there. And sometimes when you're treating the gut and they're not feeling any better, you have to dig a little deeper and look at other things. So it is a bit of a puzzle. Like I always say this, my job is to put all the pieces of the puzzle together. If I always say this to patients too, if there was one thing that was causing your issues, it would have been found. It would have been found by your primary care or regular, one of the many specialists you've already seen. My job is to put all of those pieces together and try to make sense of it and then go from there. And sometimes it's, it takes many, many months to sort of weave the picture of that puzzle together.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of the same with hormones. Hormone clinics are so popular and they don't look deeper. I tell the story of a colleague of mine, his wife, they're high net worth individuals. She was going to a hormone replacement therapy clinic. She wasn't losing weight. She's working out, I think 5 days, maybe 6 days a week. I did a GI map test on her. Her beta glucuronidase was through the roof. She wasn't detoxing her estrogens through the bowels, and that was the main problem. But if you're just putting pellets in all day, you're not going to find that.
Exactly. Totally. Yeah. And I think, I always say either start with the gut, but then even before the gut, maybe start with detoxification, teaching people how to detoxify. I think it's really important. And if you're not sleeping, you're not detoxifying. If you're not drinking enough water, going back to,
Yeah.
basics. We need water, we need hydration to detoxify. We need, chlorophyll and greens to detoxify. And we're not getting enough greens in our diet. So, this book is such a great way, both books are just such a great way to start. And even if you think you're sort of above this sort of thing, for me, like it's that family member that I can't talk to. It's that some person, like this is the perfect book for somebody who's never picked up a health book before. Start here. Always
Yeah.
start here. But I also always say, we all need to hear it. We all need to be reminded of it, even, and
Yeah.
especially the hydration thing. We need to stay on top of our hydration day in and day out. And there's a whole new chapter on hydration in this book that just sort of drives that home. And whatever new research there is out there, it's in there.
What formula do you use? So I got my last bottle with reverse osmosis remineralized water here. But what formula do you use to tell patients and clients how much water they should get? Because there's that half your body weight in ounces of water, but then if you're not adding electrolytes to it, so how do you sort that out for people?
So the bottom line is that I tell people to look at their urine output. We are meant to urinate every 2 or 3 hours during our waking hours. And literally take a half. If you're sitting at your desk for 8 hours, you should pee 3 times during that 8 hours, 2 or 3 times, 3 times really. And if you're not doing that, you're not hydrating enough. And most of us are not. That is the single most important thing to look at. And then I just give people tips and tricks. Start your day with a big glass of water, a pinch of salt, or an electrolyte mix, one a day. You don't need an electrolyte or salt in every single glass of water that you drink. And then find little habit forming things. I tell people to drink a glass of water before every meal. Number one, it'll signal, your thirst. Thirst is often confused with hunger. So maybe you won't be eating as much, but it's just a habit of one way to get extra fluid in. A green smoothie a day is a great, and this is hypothetical. I believe a green smoothie is probably 2 or 3 times as hydrating as one glass, as the same amount of water, because you're getting the fiber, you're getting the minerals, you're getting all that other stuff in there that's going to hold on to that water better. So those are a few things to do, and then whatever water you're going to drink anyway. So I don't like numbers. I think we're all sort of cut off from the next down and don't live in our bodies. Look at the symptoms of what dehydration causes, that afternoon fatigue, where we're often told, oh, your blood sugar's dropping. I got to eat. That's why I'm exhausted after lunch. It may be that, but I can honestly say I think more often than not, it's thirst. It's dehydration more than it is low blood sugar or this drop in blood sugar. There may be some reactive hypoglycemia, but once you start, hydrating is a treatment for metabolic syndrome, and so that you might not even get that drop in blood sugar when you're hydrating better.
And then fiber. So let's talk about fiber. Obviously, you're getting fiber from plants and fruits and veggies, things like that. But if people aren't getting hardly any fiber, do you have them start with a supplement or food, or how do you go about it?
Start with food. And then I love to add chia seeds, flax seeds, extra fiber. We do talk a lot about how to add fiber into your diet. Sometimes we talk about, protein powders that have extra fiber in them. There are ways to do that. You need to sort of look at how much fiber you're getting, and there are ways to measure that. It's not easy, but start with the greens, and then looking at your plates. We also do give, we also even teach people how to cook a few basic things in this book. How to poach a fish, how to cook a steak, how to make chicken, how to roast a chicken. We've lost the art of cooking. So when you're cooking, then some meal ideas that have more fiber and greens and those kind of things.
And so, how many recipes did you say are in the book?
Over 100, yeah.
Over 100. But it's not just a recipe book.
No, 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 no. There's the first, like Quench, the first half or more is the whys behind this, the habit forming things. We even talk a little bit about psychology, which is not my thing, except I will say we talk about something called harm reduction psychotherapy. Are you familiar with that term?
Mhm.
Very interesting. So it's a term coined in the drug addiction, alcohol and drug addiction field, so called harm reduction, because as we know that, you know, complete abstinence and AA, there's a really high recidivism rate of drug and alcohol addiction. And I was introduced to this probably over 20 years ago when I went to see my therapist, who's a harm reduction specialist. And I was a cigarette smoker. I tell the story in the book. I smoked cigarettes. I was working for Dr. Atkins. I was completely addicted since I was a teenager. I smoked cigarettes, hid it from everybody, but who knows who I was hiding it from. I'm sure I smelled of it. Um, and really, my self-esteem was this big with every cigarette I smoked, yet I was completely addicted to it. I went to see this therapist, and I told him this, and the first thing he said to me is like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "If you lived in Paris, and this was 20 years ago, he's like, this would be a non-issue." He took that shame off of my shoulders, and he said, and that's so in a way that was really helpful for me, because the shame was huge for me. It really was. It didn't feel good. I felt, horrible from it. And within 2 weeks I quit smoking.
Wow.
And that's often the case, but and then there's way more to that. But we talk bottom line with food, and we're meeting people where they are, complete love. Like we all have food addictions. Food is life. It's everything. We're trying to learn how to love food and love the community of food again. So we dip our toes into the psychology of this, talking about harm reduction, which is really fascinating and really growing. That field is hugely growing right now, especially with the drug addiction stuff. The bottom line is, from as a practitioner or a caregiver, and as the person, self-love is number one. So meeting people where they are, you need to just say, okay, here's where I'm at. I'm gonna try to do better. I'm gonna start here. And then also as a practitioner, like speaking to people with love and the utmost respect, and understanding that, where the food stuff comes from. Ultra processed foods are meant to be addictive. They're
Right.
snuck in there, and that's what
Yeah.
they do. It's not
Yeah.
it's not patients' faults.
Are you familiar with Paul Chek?
No.
So he's a guy, his last name is Chek, Chek, but he has the Chek Institute in San Diego, corrective holistic exercise kinesiologist. But he has, like, all these certifications that doctors go through, lay people who are interested, in health go through. He talks about the number of nutrients you need to satiate the brain, and how the scientists who were in the cigarette industry moved over to the food industry. And then they started tinkering with foods to make them more addictive.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. And it's really hard. By the way, my quitting smoking is my greatest achievement in my entire world. It's
You
not
quit
that
cold turkey?
I quit cold turkey. I went to it wasn't a hypnotherapist. It was he was an energy healer. And whatever he did to my brain, and on top of, I was ready, I was, it was this sort of thing. I did quit without any kind of nicotine or anything like that. Now, I will say though, I am a fan of nicotine patches and nicotine, whatever, gums and troches and nasal sprays. Nicotine, we have receptors for nicotine. And by the way, I was 30, in my mid 30s at the time. After I quit smoking, shortly thereafter, I developed psoriasis. And nicotine is an anti-inflammatory, so much so that doctors give it for colitis and things like that. So I am a fan of quitting smoking using nicotine. I think it will quell, but you have to be methodical about it and then getting off that nicotine or not, to be honest, or not. I think I know one of my mentors still to this day, who is a very prominent holistic doctor, and I think is open about it, but I'm not going to say his name because I'm not sure, does nicotine gum all the time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, those nicotinic receptors in the body, anti-inflammatory, they're going to help the vagus nerve,
Yeah.
all that stuff. And
Yeah.
people forget, I think people conflate, the chemicals in cigarette with the nicotine. But, if you look at the studies, I mean, like you said, the science is there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not that, the nicotine part is the addictive part, and maybe some other stuff, but I think that is the addictive part. But it's all the other crap in those cigarettes that are, I had a patient ask me recently who was of Indian descent, Asian Indian descent. And he asked about, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name, where you burn incense. Because he grew up in that, and they burn them in their house, they burn them religiously. And I was like, I don't know the answer to that. Is that a secondhand smoke? And I looked it up, and it is. I was like, oh my God, I didn't, I don't think that's ever talked about.
Right.
So that was interesting. Just in the smoke part, I just got on a tangent. Sorry, I can go off on tangents all the
Well,
time.
no, I saw someone yesterday who had elevated cadmium, and I asked her if she was a smoker, and she said no, but her mother was. And so, when I see elevated cadmium, my first question is, were you a smoker or
Yeah,
were you exposed to secondhand smoke?
yeah.
But yeah, it's nicotine. Obviously, anything can be misused, even water, right? If I drink 5 gallons of water, I'm probably going to go into renal failure, but that doesn't make water bad.
Yeah, or seizures or something like that. Yeah, that's we can absolutely overhydrate. I see it at least once a week in my practice, meaning with abnormal electrolytes on their blood tests, meaning their sodium and their potassium, I mean chloride, are super low. And I ask them, how much water you're drinking. They're like, I drink a ton of water. I'm really good about drinking water. And I'm like, well, you're drinking too much. You're flushing out your electrolytes. You're not replenishing those electrolytes. There was something recently with Brooke Shields. I think this was news. She was preparing for an off-Broadway show, singing, and she was drinking all this water, kept drinking water, keep her vocal cords. She ended up having a seizure because she overhydrated. So it can happen. It's extraordinarily rare, but I think what's not extraordinarily rare is just too much water where your electrolytes are a little bit off balance. And then it's kind of the same symptoms as dehydration. You're getting leg cramps, you're getting fatigue, so.
Yeah, I think I shared with you the story before, but I had a different molecular hydrogen machine back in 2018. And, I live in the southeastern US. During the summer. I'll typically go to the gym, but then I'll walk or jog outside. And so I'm doing that. Sauna, I'm drinking like 6 bottles a day of molecular hydrogen water, and I wasn't replenishing my electrolytes. I ended up in the ER. I couldn't move my limbs. Potassium was 2.2. They were about to do a spinal tap, but they gave me IV potassium because they have the reversal there, and then PO potassium, and I started to turn the corner in about 35, 40 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's interesting. So even like you see that more in the healthiest people, in your yogis, and the people who are super, cognizant of their health, yet, doing all this hot yoga and walking around with their water bottles. So it's interesting. And then there was that gallon water a day challenge that was going around that was scary to me. We're not Tom Brady. We don't have
Right.
his makeup.
Right. And speaking of Tom Brady, how do you adjust water consumption based on someone's activity level?
So I'm not an exercise physiologist. In the first book, we do give some, ideas of, I spoke to an exercise physiologist. If you're doing endurance, athletics like marathons or stuff like that, there's a program, there's a, a, a chemical reaction that you follow. What's an equation that you follow? And I can't remember what it is, but it's like every 15 minutes you should be drinking an electrolyte sort of replenishment for endurance athletes, that kind of thing. But it's, once again, for everybody else, you got to live in your body. You have to look at the signs and symptoms, know what it feels like to be properly hydrated. So signs and symptoms of dehydration are the usual things we know about, right? Constipation, brain fog, fatigue, dry skin, muscle stiffness. So like literally not moving with fluidity, all of those things. And then the most important thing is that urine output, looking at how much urine output you're doing. And the easiest equation I found is every 2 or 3 hours we're meant to pee. So you go and think about this, you go on a 5-hour plane ride from, east to west or west to east, and you don't get up once to pee. You're not hydrating enough. Simple
And
things like that.
talk to us about the color of urine. So I hear often over the years, I've heard that, if your urine is clear, you're overhydrated.
Yeah. Yeah. And people my age and older were always sort of taught that we're meant, you got to drink till your urine is crystal clear. Not true. It's meant to be a little bit of a straw colored, but even that has been shown, and not only because of, what you eat or what vitamins you take. Even if you don't take a B vitamin, or even if you don't eat whatever, asparagus or beets or something where it's going to tinge your urine, that the color of your urine is not perfect. It's okay. It's good to look at, but it's not a great test.
And let's talk about, I know you have some new therapies in your office, radio frequency. Tell us, for people who aren't familiar, what is it and what conditions can it be used for?
So radio frequency was actually invented many, I don't even know, many years ago. And it's been used in the OR for cauterizing vessels and stuff during surgery. And then I started using radio frequency vaginally for like vaginal dryness, for urinary incontinence, because what it does is it deposits heat into in a certain depth in the tissues, and it increases collagen. So we're tightening those muscles vaginally. Like, so that's how I started it. I was at another office. They had a machine there. And I was like, this is fantastic. It really helped, especially like with urinary incontinence. Like that was a game changer for so many women. So when I moved into my own office, I called a company. I was like, I want to talk about radio frequency. The salesperson comes in, and basically we're talking. I was like, well, what about vaginal radio frequency? He was selling me a facial radio frequency with microneedling, and he talked me into buying one of those. And they didn't even have a vaginal one at the time. So I ended up getting a separate vaginal machine, but I ended up getting this radio frequency. It's cosmetic. So it's using microneedling with radio frequency on your face to help sort of decrease fine lines and wrinkles. It helps. So, but basically all it does is it increases collagen. It's not a quick fix, and it's perfect for my patients. My patients don't want facelifts. They don't want fillers. They don't want Botox. They don't want to look anything. It just maintains your natural sort of, skin. So that was how I got to it.
Is it like it's not like a vampire facial where you're red like a crab for 3 or 4 days?
No, there's no downtime. Most people, a few hours, you're red. Some people, it might be a little bit longer, but a day or two. There's no downtime. You leave here, you're pink, and then within a few hours it goes down, or by the next day it goes down. It's a phenomenal treatment, I think, and it's just perfect for my practice. You know what? I could do that in my practice. That's what like my patients would want, and it's been super successful and great results. Like, it's not, this is the thing, you got to manage expectations. It's not like getting Botox and you're like,
Yeah.
perfect. It does take a few months for your collagen to build, and it layers upon each other. And the other thing is that we lose collagen, we still lose collagen as we age. So there is repeated treatments once a year kind of thing after you get an initial series. of these treatments, but it's great.
And how many is typically included in the initial series? 5 to 10?
Three. No, you do three anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks apart, and then from there, once or twice a year for upkeep. And vaginally, like for me, when I did it, when I went into menopause, the first I did it one time, and then I didn't need it again for almost 3 years later. And for me, I'm just going to be completely honest with you. I've never had kids. And as soon as I went into menopause, I became my mother. I remember my mother used to laugh and hold herself because she was going to pee because she was laughing so hard. And I was like, oh my God, I've become my mother. And it just happens. It does. You don't have to have kids for that to happen. It's just this pelvic floor weakness that whatever, we don't do our Kegels, we don't do, so the vaginal radiofrequency is a great thing to really help with that.
And how many treatments is that the same? Like 3?
Yeah, I mean, so it depends. For me, initially I only needed one, and then I didn't need another one for 3 years later. And then, but the company recommends you do three, and then yearly or every 2 years, or just depending when you start to notice symptoms coming back. But that lasts a pretty long time.
And can you mention the name of the machine that you use?
Yeah, I use Secret RF. It's Qterra, which I really like. The big one in the field is Morpheus 8. That's the one that has done the best advertising, I think. I really believe that the Secret is the best in class. You can adjust it to whatever you want, and it doesn't hurt as much. That's the bigger thing as the Morpheus 8. You do numb, if we're doing it on the face, vaginally is nothing, by the way, because you're not using microneedling with vaginal. You're just using the radio frequency. But the face, you're using the microneedling, and it hurts, and you talk people through it, you numb them. Some people even do them in a little like laughing gas, that kind of thing. I don't do that in my office. I just never learned because I think it's not that bad.
Right. And can you give us a rough, I mean, New York City, I understand prices are going to be different, but
Yeah.
price for a series of 3, rough estimate?
Well, there's always, each session is, it depends on how much you're doing. You're doing the face, you're doing the face and the neck, and the chest, scars. Like I'll always throw in, when I'm doing, I'm like, do you have any scars you want me to do? Scars, by the way, acne scars, it's amazing. It's unbelievable at how it can help heal acne scars or any kind of scars. So I'll always just throw in a scar here or there if you have anything else on the body. But if you're doing just the face and the neck, it's $1,200 per session. And then if you buy a package of 3, you get a discount. I usually, like once a year, it's like $500 off a package of 3, that kind of thing.
Okay. That's not bad at all.
It's not inexpensive.
Yeah. But, it also beats putting something with the name toxin in your body.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm not opposed to Botox for like cerebellar spasticity and things like that.
Yeah.
But I think, people can overdo it easily, with the filler.
Yeah. The filler stuff is really, I have yet to see a great filler on anybody. It's so obvious, but which is okay. Also, we're meeting people where they are, whatever makes them happy. But it changes you. You look different. This you're not looking different. You're looking refreshed. You're looking a little, smoother. It's just a nice way to do it, tighter.
And how do you feel about collagen supplementation?
I like it. I believe in it. I think I came out with the book. I came out with a line of all sort of anything you can put in your smoothie or your blender. So about a line of powdered products. So powdered proteins, powdered collagen, powdered magnesium, powdered probiotic, just to sort of go along with the book, powdered colostrum, so anything that you can sort of put in a blender. I think people really like it. I'm a big fan of collagen. I think people really do notice a difference in their skin and their nails and their hair, especially, and their gut. Collagen helps heal a leaky gut. It's very good, really good for your gut. So I'm a fan.
So we do quite a bit of epigenetic testing, and we look at serotonin pathways. And I know there's some research saying it can deplete serotonin. So if people are taking collagen, I'm like, that's fine, but you got to take the 5-HTP with it if they have the suboptimal or poor version of the 5-HTP LPR for serotonin or tryptophan hydroxylase 2.
Oh,
And so I just thought I'd throw that in there because if
oh,
someone has a
interesting. I
history
didn't
of,
even know that. I learned something new. That's awesome. What can
yeah.
I ask what genetic testing you're doing? Are you
So the DNA company,
okay, cool. Cool.
yeah. It's like 4.99, but it doesn't just look at single nucleotide polymorphisms. It also looks at copy number variants, indels, insertions and deletions, loci like 9p21. If you're 4G to 6G, you're going to have terrible endothelial lining health, most likely. 0 to 2G is optimal, but that's where things like arteriosyl come in and endocalyx pro to work on the glycocalyx.
Yeah.
So I don't rely too much on it, but I like to combine it because it's a one-time test, so it can
Yeah.
help people prioritize their supplements to a degree.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the age of the genetic testing is really coming into fashion and being useful. For a long time there, I didn't think it was useful. Now I do think that there are really a lot of use for it. And
Yeah, and so what are you working on now? Are you working on another book?
no, no, it's not easy. I need a break. I'm not sure I'm going to write another book. We'll see. You never know. I may change my mind a year from now, but Quench came out, gosh, it was 2018. So it was a long time after that book. Uh, and
I
so,
thought you could just crank one of these out in a weekend.
oh gosh, no, maybe you can now with AI stuff. I wish I'd known about AI when I was writing this book, but
Yeah.
but no, I it's a lot of work. It really is. It's work I love to do, but it's not it's a lot. I want to focus on other things. I don't know, focus on myself for a little bit. Focus,
And do you
just
have any new gadgets or toys besides the radio frequency device in your office?
any new. I didn't hear what you said.
Gadgets or toys like
Um,
biohacking?
oh, you know what? Nothing. I'm not a huge sort of person who does a lot of procedures on people at all. That's why I thought the Secret RF is something that would be really good. I have no desire to be a Medi Spa or anything like that. I did just get a vibration plate in my office because I think that that's something I wanted to have, and I figured, what, I'd give it to the benefit of my patients, let them stand on it for 10 minutes before they see me, that kind of thing. So I really love that thing. I just have little things more for patients to play around with when they're here. I have the compression boots and those kind of things. I do, yeah, but nothing. I don't have a lot of space in New York either. My New York office is a typical New York office.
Yeah. Well, the real estate market, right? It's not cheap, right?
No, no,
And do you see people? I know you see people virtually, but they have to see you once in person, correct?
yeah, yeah, and you know what? That's changing. I recently, for New York, I have to be licensed in the state that they live in to do telehealth. So, which was not the case a few years back. So, I have to sort of really think about, I have people in New Jersey and Connecticut, and in order for them not to come in and see me like absolutely everybody has to be seen in person anyway. But the telehealth stuff is a little gray right now, and I need to figure that out. So I'm in the process of sort of um, figure it's this is medicine. It's always so difficult. Like it's not just a simple answer and getting lawyers involved and trying to figure it out. People don't need to hear this, but it's it's an issue. So and honestly, I always say this too. Your appointment with me starts when I watch you walk into the room. When I see you walk into the room from the and we're sitting there and I watch, the visual thing and in person is a far better experience. If you're doing, I don't know, I can, I don't even know. I'm not even sure I agree with um, therapy via telehealth, but we do live in a world of convenience, um, so much so that I think it's detrimental too, because we're not moving, we're not,
Right.
in so many ways. So I don't know. I so many ways I want to go backwards, but I can't. I want, we need to move forward. So it's hard.
Wait, so do you have an EMR or do you still have paper charts?
No, I have an EMR.
Okay, good. No,
Yeah,
I have
yeah,
colleagues who still have, they're in their late 60s, early 70s. They sell paper charts. I'm
yeah.
like, they're up to me. That would be cool.
Yeah. No, I have an EMR. I love AI for things like, I always say AI first for blogs and information, then pull it back to me. Like I'm going to do an AI where it records our visit, so I don't have to take notes, and it
Oh,
gets everything. Like that's, yeah, no, I am a believer in progress, but I think there's certain things that we have to have common sense that's detrimental to us, you
yeah.
know? So,
It's just like using AI, to quote unquote diagnose conditions. I think because the AI has to draw its knowledge from somewhere, right?
yeah, yeah,
And I mean, what happened to the physical exam? I mean, are you going to program a robot to do a physical exam?
totally. Yeah. And I mean, that's, I was actually trained, I did a little bit of medicine in London, in England, many, many years ago, where they did not have the testing that we had here at that time. And they really relied on a physical exam. So I really learned how to do it. And I can't tell you how many people sit down with me and after my exam come in and said, like, God, I haven't had, it happens, multiple times a week. Wow, I have not been examined like that in a long time. Just like doctors are not doing it.
Yeah,
And it's, granted, of all the years, I haven't found much, except it does, there's something too about putting your hands on a patient. I have the privilege, like, to have a patient who's never met me before, to allow me to do that to them, to just even listen to their heart and touch their neck, like there's something about connection that
right.
we're losing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What's something you know today that you wish you would have known 8 to 10 or 12 years ago?
Oh. Um, Something today that I knew today that I wish I knew. Well, I mean, the microbiome stuff is not that old. You
Yeah,
know, I think that is the hugest thing. Um, I can't think of anything. I mean, it's progress. It's things that are going to make my life easier, like electronic medical, those kind of things, this taping conversations. Um, what do people answer in that? I can't even think of a
some people are, only been into functional medicine for 8 years. They're like, oh, I wish I would have known about, functional blood analysis, gut microbiome testing, micronutrient testing, hormone testing, Dutch testing, all that stuff. So, but I mean, you've been doing
yeah.
this for a minute, right?
Yeah, yeah. I've been doing it for since 1998. That's when I first started working for Dr. Atkins. Yeah, I mean the testing has come far. Um, Implementing testing is never an easy thing, by the way, for a doctor, so
Right,
it's always like just saying like, oh, I have this new test, like great, it is a process to implement a new test, even a new supplement in a practice.
yeah,
Somebody's talking about a supplement, like it's always a process. It's never a quick sort of thing. Oh, like CGMs, I think are game changers, by the way.
yeah.
Um, or but just so you know, I've been doing 4-hour glucose tolerance tests since 1998. That was like Dr. Atkins' whole thing. And I even think that it's still a better test than a CGM, where you're doing a glucose with its insulin response over the course of 4 hours. I do them often. I don't think we're doing those tests enough. But a CGM is a great thing, especially if you're thinking about hypoglycemia, patients who
Right.
are dizzy and can't figure out what's going on. And this is like raw data. Like your blood sugar is dropping 2 hours after you eat your lunch of, whatever, sandwich and
Yeah, and I have a colleague who's a PA, and she said, I'll give a husband and wife both TGMs, and they'll eat, for example, an apple, and one of their blood sugars goes, the other one just barely increases. So it's not always what you would expect.
no, no. And I use that. I always say this all the time. You have no idea what that's, you think a sweet potato is good for you. It may or may not be. I don't know,
Yeah,
for you. And
right,
and then working on and it doesn't mean you have to get rid of it forever, right? We're gonna improve your cells, improve your cellular response to insulin by exercise, by supplementation, by getting rid of the fat, by working on your hormones in your gut. And then you may be able to eat that apple with a better insulin response over time.
Well, awesome. Thanks so much for your work that you're doing. I'm going to check out the book. It's on my to-do list. And maybe when book 3 comes out, we can have you back on again.
I would love it. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Have a blessed day, Dr. Dana.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.